You're listening to the No Bullshit Vegan Podcast, episode 190. Listen in as I chat with two awesome subscribers and podcast listeners about strength training and vegan nutrition.
Welcome to the No Bullshit Vegan Podcast. Myth-busting and evidence-based advice to help you kick butt with your health and fitness on a vegan diet. Here's your host, Karina Inkster.
Hey, welcome to the show. I'm Karina, your go-to no BS vegan fitness and nutrition coach. Thanks for joining me today. I'm sharing the third installment today of strategy calls with my subscribers and listeners. So if you haven't listened to the other two, about once a year, I open up my schedule to between 20 and 30 people on my email list. Each person gets a free strategy session where they can chat about whatever they'd like, creating an effective workout plan, brainstorming vegan meal prep, plotting vegan world domination, pretty much anything. And by the way, if you're not yet hanging out in my little corner of the internet and getting my newsletter, which is the only way to get free strategy sessions and other giveaways, head to our show notes at nobullshitvegan.com/190 and sign up. So first up, I'm sharing a call with Dan. We've chatted on social media before, but this was our first face-to-face meeting. Dan is a triathlete and a marathoner who had some specific questions for me about strength training to complement his endurance training. Hello, Daniel.
Hello, Karina.
Hey, do you go by Dan?
Dan, yes.
Okay, I'll call you Dan. I saw Dan in your name thing on the Riverside thing. I'm like, it's probably Dan.
Yeah, it is Dan.
Nice to meet you. We've been in touch on the internets, but not face to face.
Yeah, you're definitely one of the vegan coaches that I follow, and I am a triathlete primarily, also marathoner.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured since we only have 20 minutes, I would hit you with hopefully like 3 solid questions.
Ooh, I like that.
You're a strength coach, right? So in the 3 disciplines, I really struggle in cycling and developing power.
Okay.
And so as a strength coach, what 3 exercises would you suggest for a cyclist to develop strength?
That is a great question. I should ask first, do you have any counterindications, any injuries, any moves that are off the table?
Not at the moment. I'm coming off of an injury that was a metatarsal injury in my foot.
Okay.
And sometimes I have a little bit of problem with my hip, but I think it's it's right hip, left calf, and because the leg was in a cast last year.
Okay, yikes.
So I'm kind of rehabbing at the moment.
Got it.
So nothing's off the table as far as strength. I'm not like a power lifter, but I probably need to be doing some, I'm guessing, heavier weight to get stronger.
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be an endurance sport,
Yeah.
but it has chunks or small sprints of really intense efforts, like when you're climbing a hill, when you're sprinting to the finish line, passing. Yeah, so it's interesting because you need both things. You need to have the endurance base,
Okay.
but you also need to have power. And most of that is going to come from bike training,
Mm-hmm.
but your cross training in the gym can be specific to those things like passing, hills, sprinting to the finish line, right?
Have you heard the term functional threshold power?
I don't know if I have.
FTP. So like functional threshold power is like the theoretical wattage output that you can put out over an hour. And I know that a lot of that is having enough muscular strength to maintain that. While some of it is endurance, like it's also about like being able to recruit both like the slow twitch and the fast twitch muscles. And I've got the slow twitch there. I just don't think I'm recruiting a lot of fast twitch sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Can I give you 4 exercises?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So the first 3 are kind of the main lower body movement patterns.
Okay.
And so those 3 are squat, hinge, and lunge. So squat, you could do any form of squat, but for our specific scenario, we're working on as heavy as you can because you want to be working against heavy weight,
Okay.
trying to move the weight as quickly as possible. So even if in real life, if the bar or the weight or the kettlebell, if it isn't moving quickly, your goal is to have it move as quickly as possible, right? So you're telling yourself.
So like from a rack squat, it would just be boom, not slow and controlled, but like fast and controlled.
Fast and controlled. I like that. Yep.
Okay.
So for this purpose, we're not doing 15 to 20 reps of things.
Okay.
So like a goblet squat is probably not the greatest option.
Okay.
I would do what you just mentioned, which is a rack, like barbell squat.
I was doing a lot of goblet squats in the past, thinking like that was going to help, but I was doing a lot of reps.
Well, a lot of reps would help you with the endurance side of things, but if you're focusing just on power, go to the like 5 to 8 rep range or maybe even lower. Don't just do it overnight though, right? But like ease yourself into it.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, you should be maxing out at around 8 reps.
Max at 8. Okay.
Yeah. So whatever form that can take. I just recently got a safety bar. Have you seen those?
No.
So you can have your hands right in front of your shoulders to do a back squat
Okay.
instead of having them kind of like behind you.
Sure.
Anyway,
Okay.
it's still the same idea. It's
Safety
heavy
bar.
ass weight.
Okay.
Yeah. Same concept.
All right.
Okay, so squat is number 1.
Okay.
Hinge is number 2, and that's a deadlift. So any sort of hamstring, posterior chain activation, which is especially important for cyclists to make sure you develop those
Okay.
and not just the quads. And again, heavy 5 to 8 reps, your basic barbell deadlift is probably going to be your best call. I don't know if you've played around with that much, but you can do a conventional stance or a sumo stance is kind of personal preference. Up to you.
I have not tried the sumo stance. I've struggled a little bit with the form with that. I may have to like watch some videos again because that like it's not a motion that I've tried a lot. Sumo stance.
Yeah. Do you have long legs compared to your torso?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So it might be a good option for people who have really long legs, just respective to their torso.
Okay.
The sumo stance makes the bar a little closer to you, so you don't have to hinge quite as far, but it's worth playing around with.
Okay. So sumo stance deadlift. And it's a hinge I'll see if I can find some videos on it. I'm sure if I Google sumo stance deadlift on YouTube, I can.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3 is any form of lunge. So these are the 3 basic lower body movement patterns we want to cover. And there's a bonus one just for your scenario. But number 3 is lunge.
Okay.
That involves any sort of split squat stance, right? So you could do a walking lunge, you could do a Bulgarian split squat, you can do just a regular split squat, which is basically a lunge, except you're not stepping back every time. So you just put one foot in front, one foot behind,
Okay.
and then you're doing like a static up and down kind of motion.
Okay.
So anything split, we're trying to get a little bit of stability, balance. You're working mostly quads and glutes, but also stability, single leg. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, now, number 4 is going to depend on what equipment you have available. Does your gym have a sled?
Sled. I don't know. I'd have to look for that. So this is like a push sled?
Yeah. So it's usually like you'd have to have a turf area, or if it's outdoors, some places like in California and stuff, they've got outdoor training areas. They have sleds on wheels.
Okay. I'm thinking like maybe like a CrossFit gym would have that or
Yes,
yeah.
definitely.
Okay. Tell me about it though. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of the bonus move, right? So the first 3, that's going to be like 90% of your results.
I can find that in any gym anywhere almost. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The sled, usually I've seen those in like specialized personal training gyms where everyone just works with clients and it's not open to the public.
Right.
Or CrossFit for sure. Kind of depends. But anyways, the point is you are sprinting against resistance.
Okay.
Which is basically what you're doing on the bike when you're powering up a hill, for example, right?
I've never thought of that, but you see like American football players pushing sleds.
So what I used to do when I trained people in person, which I did for years before I went online, was I would stand on the sled myself with weights, and then the client would push me around the gym. It was pretty fun.
Yell at them. Go, come on.
Yeah, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So however much weight you can pile on there if you have it available.
Okay.
Do it for like 20 seconds max. So we're talking like short and intense intervals.
Okay. My girlfriend was a rugby player and she was suggesting, medicine ball slams where you come up off your like overhead and then like you're going up and then calf activation and then slamming back down.
Yep.
What's your thoughts on that?
I think that's a really good conditioning exercise. So overall, like VO2 max.
Yeah. It's
not going to do a lot for quads and hamstrings necessarily.
And that's really where I'm going to be activating. Okay.
And glutes. Yeah.
Okay.
I just thought of one alternative. If you can't find a sled, if you can rig up some kind of a system where you're sprinting against a resistance band, those like pull-up resistance bands, the really thick ones.
Pull-up resistance band. Okay.
Yeah. So you put that around your hips.
Okay.
And it's anchored to something really heavy like a squat rack or something like that. And then you just like sprint against the resistance from the band. It's the same idea as like wind sprints, which your girlfriend may have done at some point. Same idea.
There's a wing in rugby, which I guess is a lot of sprinting. So,
Aha. She probably has done them then.
because I've got all kinds of exercises for you. Okay, I'm listening. Second question. So I know you are an open water swimmer. I just did my 4th Ironman, but the thing that keeps happening to me is I keep running into events where the water is below 60 degrees Fahrenheit and I am ending up hypothermic.
Oh, yikes. 60 is cold.
Yeah, I'm getting out of the water. I'm having a lot of problems. What are your strategies as a long distance open water swimmer to prevent that from happening?
That is such a great question. Okay, my strategy is to swim in a pool for half the year.
I do that too. In Arizona, it's not cold here. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because my open water season is only from June to the
Okay.
beginning of October. I'm in the
Okay.
Pacific Northwest.
Okay.
So I'm usually stopping my season when the water here is probably around 65.
Okay.
So even that 5 degrees makes a difference.
It makes a big difference when you're talking about an hour in the
Yeah,
water.
exactly.
I finally pulled the trigger on a different wetsuit. There's a company called Blue 70 that makes a
Yes.
thermally lined wetsuit, which I have it. I haven't tried it yet, but I've been through 2 races now where I'm getting out of the water and I'm
Brutal.
non-functional, like just like a wet dog. So it's maybe not maybe not the best situation.
No. Do you wear a hood as well, like a wetsuit and also
I
swim
do,
cap and hood?
yeah, like a thermal cap, and we actually
hmm
tried booties this time too, and it's still like the wetsuit that I had is more of a capri style cut, and it still was like between that and the hat and the booties, I was still hypothermic. So
Hmm. It's not an ideal situation. And also, I'm a total wimp when it comes to cold water,
okay,
so I don't
you're
extend my.
Canadian, come on, that's not an
I
excuse. Yeah,
know. But
yeah,
also, I recently started getting Raynaud's in my hands, and it's really freaking annoying. And so, like, as soon as that starts happening, I'm like, yeah, my season's over. There's no point.
okay,
However, the people I know who have really long swim seasons,
yeah,
they are people who dip in the ocean
okay,
at least once a week
like
all
cold
year.
plunge, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what is your? That's a good question because I was debating about investing in a cold plunge here. Do you do any cold plunging?
I do not.
Okay, all right,
Again, Raynaud's and
yeah,
wimp
okay,
status.
okay, no,
um, but if your goal is to do an Ironman swim, which is a long swim in cold water,
yep,
there is something to be said for training your system. And so, like, if you're swimming in a pool and then you have to do your race and you haven't trained for that,
yeah.
yeah,
It can be tough because we train all year round here in Arizona, and the water here, like in the summertime, just heats it. We're doing, like it can be 40 plus degrees Celsius outside, and like the water's it's bath water, and then
in the
you get
80s,
to
probably.
yeah, and then you get to well, we have our Ironman here in Arizona in November, and they have the same issue, right? The water cools off. We have temperature swings sometimes during the day of like 40 degrees. So like at night,
Wow.
it's big. So they had the same issue. I guess the water was under 60 degrees again at this last. They just had the race here maybe 2 weeks ago, and people were having the same problem. So like, it's been kind of a like I need to crack. This is like one of those things. Like if I can crack that, I would save a lot of time between that swim to bike transition.
Yeah, well, in
Yep,
your situation,
yep,
because you don't have access to frickin' cold water all the time,
yeah,
it might actually make sense to get some kind of a cold plunge. Like,
yeah.
I never thought I would be recommending cold plunge to anyone because I
Okay.
do think it's overrated. And yeah, there's studies that show it can help a little bit with inflammation depending on the context, blah, blah, blah.
It's just a big investment too.
It really is.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. You need space for it. It's like a whole thing. But if you're serious and you don't have access to cold water, like I could just go down to the ocean. It's probably 55 degrees right now if I
Yeah.
wanted to do a cold dip, right?
That may not be fun though.
Not really. Not
Yeah, no,
really.
no.
But you're basically training your system though the same
Okay.
way that you train for your 3 sports.
Okay. Just like adaptation through specific training.
exactly.
The other question, and this one is more coming from my girlfriend who is kind of new to the whole vegan world.
Mm,
She's starting to do 5Ks and train and all that. She's like, she wanted me to ask, like, what are your typical like pre-workout go-to snacks, and also like how do you fuel for like your long events, your long swims?
that's a great question.
Yeah.
I always train in the morning, and this is just personal preference, weird allergy and food and exercise combinations.
Hmm.
So I always train in the morning, and I'll have oatmeal like 9 times out of 10 because it's a complex carb, keeps me full. Usually pretty plain, but that's just because I have a lot of food allergies.
Okay.
Normally, I'd put in a little bit of a protein source, so like hemp hearts or chia seeds or something like that.
Okay.
And I'm not actually doing a lot of long events, but when I do, I kind of make my own, like, kind of oatmeal cracker thing. So, like, when we did a big group swim between 3 and 5K, depending on what people were doing,
That's a long. I mean, that's
that's a
a
half
long
marathon.
swim. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. We all have our own kayaker or paddler on a
With
stand up
with a,
paddleboard.
like food and fuel.
Yeah, exactly. So they
Awesome.
have our
Okay.
water bottle. They're like throwing food at us, basically.
I was wondering how you guys did that. So like, man, like, aren't you getting like dehydrated on these long things? You know, like
Oh,
it's
yeah, yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Okay.
So for sure, we'll have like, if she's doing something longer than a half marathon length, so 5K, you probably don't actually need to do anything during a 5K other than water. But if it's super long, she'll probably want electrolytes
Hmm.
in that water bottle
Okay.
and some form of easy to digest carb. One of my swim buddies, actually the person that I run the swim club with, they did figs on their half
Okay.
marathon swim.
Yeah.
Someone else was doing dates.
I
Just
love
like
dates. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, easy to
Yep.
digest, quick energy if you're doing an endurance race.
Okay.
So the figs worked for them, but lots of other people use dates for the same thing. Or you can even stuff peanut butter into a date and then you've got like a little package.
Yeah. I'll throw one thing at you and get your take on this. I have been mixing Bisan powder. So are you familiar with chickpea powder?
Yes. I don't use it a ton, but yeah, some of our clients do.
I was looking at a recipe, and apparently you can make a chickpea powder tofu, but I found that it actually mixes really well into oatmeal
Oh, interesting.
as a protein additive, and it seems to slow down that carbohydrate spike. So, like
Hmm.
when I'm eating just oatmeal, I feel like I'm hungry again pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But like adding some of this chickpea flour in seems to like slow that process down just a touch.
Interesting. I might have to try this.
Yeah, so it's either sold as BESAN, Basan powder, or like, but it's typically used for making chickpea tofu.
Hmm. I'm gonna write that down.
You had a recommendation about one of the new tofus that's made with fava beans,
Mm-hmm.
and we finally started getting that in the stores down here in Arizona.
Oh,
Yeah.
sweet. Have you tried it yet?
It is good. It's good. It's very dense.
Yes.
Okay, I guess last question then. How do you prepare that? Because I love tofu. Okay.
Air fryer. Do you guys have an air fryer?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one
It's
Okay.
basically a vegan protein must. I mean, like,
Yeah.
Coach Zoe and I basically should be spokespeople for the Kasori brand of air fryers. We're not, but we kind of feel like we should be.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so it doesn't need a long time though, because as you said, it's really dense, right? So compared to soy-based tofu,
Okay.
it dries out really quickly. But I like the air fryer because it gets crispy enough on the
Right.
outside.
Do you use any oil or anything, or do you just dice it and toss it in?
Well, usually I'm a lazy human and I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't have time, so I just do it without anything.
Anything. Okay.
But if you have
Mhm.
like a spray oil, like cooking spray,
Yep.
canola oil,
Mhm.
olive oil, whatever,
Yep. Anything
I
like
feel
that.
like that coats it better and then it
Yep.
gets crispier.
Okay. Definitely.
Yeah.
That's all I
Yeah.
got for you, Katrina. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I was just like stoked. I'm a fan of the podcast. One last quick thing. So when they dropped the Google Podcasts, it's been harder to find I've been using a platform called Castbox,
Okay.
and I wish you guys were in there.
I have not heard that. I'm going to write it down.
Yeah,
Castbox?
Castbox. So
Okay.
it's a little bit it's like when
Castbox.
because like Stitcher went away, which kind of
Yeah.
stunk, and then
Yeah.
Google Podcasts went away, and like I'm on the Android platform, and it's
Mm,
tougher to find. Like I can find you on Spotify. I just don't use Spotify quite as much.
this is good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Good intel.
Yeah. And are you on YouTube Music? I think you are.
I think I'm in the process of transferring everything over there. So I should actually, that's a good reminder. I should check to
Okay.
see if it worked
So
properly.
those two things, Castbox and
Yeah.
YouTube Music. Would love to
I've
see
written it
them.
down.
Okay.
Amazing. Well, nice to chat with you, Dan. We'll be in touch soon. Dan, so awesome to speak with you. Thank you so much for booking in. Next up, I'm sharing a call with Julia, who at the time of our call was doing some nutrition coaching with me and my team. And she wanted to discuss a few points around calories and basal metabolic rate, and also how strength training might fit into the overall equation of health and body composition. What's been going on in Julia's world? We've been creeping on your nutrition. We've been talking a little bit about workouts. How are things?
Things are interesting. And, I feel like I'm a unique character, Karina, and I sent in some possible topics.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to check in with you personally on the basal metabolic rate and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, totally.
So I feel like let's do that another time soon, if you're good with that.
For sure. Yeah, we could do that. I do have the points. I mean, some of them might actually kind of be related because it's hunger cues and it's like timing of food and the kind of aspects that you put into the topic suggestions.
Oh, cool. I mean, I can reiterate my basal metabolic thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can go from there with hunger cues.
Sure. Yeah, why don't we do that?
I really do think I am unique, but not alone in that
Mm-hmm.
my comfortable eating range is honestly I can easily eat 1,200 calories and feel great.
Mm-hmm.
And yet that's below my calculated data-driven BMR. And we also talked about eating 80-20
Mm-hmm.
or 80% full. And it's interesting, Karina, I was reading about the 80% full thing, and there's a Japanese phrase,
Mm-hmm.
which I won't butcher right now.
I think that's where it comes from originally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that the average Japanese person actually eats about 1,200 calories a day if they haven't been indoctrinated with American fast food.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm remembering when I was younger, I'm 69. So when I previously lost weight, I knew that if I went to bed feeling hungry, like on a scale from 1 to 10, and I felt like I was a 3 or 4, I felt like I was burning fat, and I was.
Mm-hmm.
So any comments on folks like me, and we Americans are programmed like stop eating 3 hours before bedtime, God forbid, So there's a lot of rulesy stuff out there
It's true.
that I'm beginning to question. So just your comments on that, so I don't burn up all my time with you.
No, it's all good. These things are all related, right? And I think to the BMR topic, yeah, we are all individuals, and there's only so much useful info that we're going to get from an online calculator, even if it takes into account our age and our activity and our sleep patterns and whatever else. We're all individuals. And so these calculators are just based on very basic demographic info, and they're not taking your, like Julia's specific genetics into account, right? So we all have different metabolic rates. I know for a fact that mine is higher than what a calculator would tell me because I eat a ridiculous amount of food. And according to these calculators, I should weigh like 30 pounds more than I actually do. So there are differences for sure. And it goes in both directions. So I feel like we got to take that into account. There is a point where if you're eating super low calories, which we would consider, like 1,100 or something like that, and you're also strength training and you're doing other activities and, looking at the whole picture, sometimes we can point out, okay, maybe that's a bit low given the context, but you know yourself best. And so being at a place right now where you're working on affecting body composition, I was going to say losing muscle mass. We don't want to do that. Losing fat, maintaining muscle mass, that's where these macros and calories can come in. Is you don't want to lose fat and muscle. You want to be able to maintain the muscle that you have, but you also want to get physique results, right?
This process is helping me hone in on how do I pursue my uniqueness rather than just reading
Totally.
blah, blah, blah. And I have
Yeah.
found, I mentioned to you that I totally drank the, in general, whole foods, plant-based, beloved vegan doctor Kool-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not thriving on higher carbs, lower protein,
Same.
so it was a paradigm shift to add protein and add some fat. I'm hopeful I'll get to my formula of success for me, but I do feel so much more stable and grounded with more protein. So that alone.
Amazing. And also, here's a question for you, because this is something you've been working on with us as well, looking at protein sources and tracking food and whatnot.
Yeah.
How does it feel? Does this feel sustainable? Does it feel insane and you can only do it for another 2 weeks? Like, how does it feel in relation to your day-to-day? Eating more protein, thinking about it more? What are the logistics?
I'll tell you what, I'm actually having the reverse, in a way, experience. Like, I was always so focused on low calorie density foods and the fact that I, quote, should only need 10% protein or whatever, and then 10% fat or whatever. So avoiding nuts.
Mm-hmm.
It has been relaxing for me. I need to still focus on fibers. So I found this awesome Bob's Red Mill hemp protein.
Oh, sweet. Yeah.
And it's great. And a serving has 14 grams of protein and like 11 grams of fiber from the hemp. So I have to look a little bit harder for the protein. And sometimes I rely on, we make seitan at our house and,
Perfect.
but I had to bless the fact that it's okay to have more protein.
Yes.
And I find I am less compulsively focused on, oh my God, unless I stick to this formula, I'm going to fail. And I had to look and say, I'm not being successful in this formula anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And, I found an awesome old Navy SEALs workout book that I loved because it has a lot of yoga stuff in it. And the guy was like a cosmic Zen master, Navy SEALs guy.
Wow.
And I know, right? I'm like, who knew? We're everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
We're everywhere. And in the book, he also said, and this was for male young guys, if you're working on endurance and you're doing this and that, you're going to have a lot higher carbs and less protein, whatever.
It's context dependent.
Yeah. And he even said in that resource, if you're building muscle, you need more, not even taking into account being female and being 69 years old or.
Exactly.
And y'all aren't 69 and you're eating a lot more protein.
And we're going to be needing more as we get older because of absorption and maintaining bone density, which gets more and more important. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
All right. So Karina, here is my question of the day.
Okay. Bring it on.
I think about all these pundit doctors, all of whom happen to be male, by the way, who I love, who are changing the world with plant-based eating. And there is the argument, like McDougall's entire case of starch-based eating, that entire world populations, their primary source of energy was, say, corn for Central and South America, or rice for Asia, or potatoes for Ireland or Europe, and that historically people, I'm going to say, survived and thrived. And I'm like, well, if I feel so much better with more protein, how is it? These cultures may not have had access to as much protein as I can have. What about that theory? Because it's beautiful. It's an argument to shift to plant-based eating, that you don't need, and nobody needs the amount of protein that Americans think we need anyway.
Very true. Yes.
But just your comments on the starch-based diet philosophy, and maybe it's different because we're not living 500 years ago.
Yeah, that's a really great question. You are the only person who has ever posed that, so kudos to you. I think it would be very interesting to actually go into some of the research and look at lifespans, because 500 years ago, we did not live to 90, probably didn't even live to 75 at that point. So, we're talking about people now who reasonably could live to 100 and still be thriving at that point. I mean, I was just talking to my swim buddy after our swim. He's 89. He's turning 90 soon.
What?
He's still working out in the gym for an hour and then swimming half a mile. Like, the dude is a machine. He's going to live to 100. Was that happening 500 years ago? Probably not. Not on a regular basis anyway. So there's kind of like this modernization. We're all living longer. We have healthcare. There are other contexts at play here. But the fact remains, it's entirely possible to thrive on high carb diets. But if you're somebody who strength trains, and these people back then are just kind of strength training, doing endurance work as part of their regular day. They're farming, they're carrying water,
They're walking.
they're walking. It's super physical, right? But they're not like bodybuilding in a gym, right? So I feel like the context is a bit different. These people also are not working on weight loss. They have to maintain a certain level of fat to survive.
Right.
We don't in our current society. We have an abundance of food everywhere.
Right.
So I feel like there are differences, but at the same time, it is possible to thrive in those circumstances. Like if we were marathon runners, I mean, you and I specifically, we would need a shitload more carbs than we're eating right now.
Yeah.
That's probably more like what these folks were doing is they're on their feet. They're probably doing 40K a day just in walking, which is almost a marathon, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that makes sense given the context is they're just naturally more active and we're not. I mean, I'm a fitness coach and I sit on my ass all day unless I really take a focused like, okay, I got to be on my bike desk now.
Yeah.
Right? We're all way more sedentary and I think it doesn't necessarily apply to what things were like even a couple 100 years ago. But I'm not an expert on this topic. I'm just pulling that out of my ass at this point. I'd love to go into it though.
Yeah, it's really intriguing. And I remember many years ago, before I became plant-based, before I became vegan, and I had gained weight at menopause and I lost the 65 pounds on a high protein, low fat, low carb type of plan.
Mm-hmm.
And then I became a coach for that program for many years. And I have two comments about that, but it was started because the founders found that people that were unable to move normally because of an accident or a recovery or being in the hospital on carbs, they were not maintaining muscle mass. So they switched the ratio and fed them protein in the hospital. And that was a lot more successful for them.
Mm-hmm.
So then they transferred that to the general population. But, I still think that, coming full circle, this base metabolic rate thing is intriguing because my sister has struggled with weight too, works out too, as I do, was phenomenally successful with stuff like Weight Watchers.
Mm-hmm.
Me, zero.
Interesting.
And I don't have problems with sticking to something because of my history and, and all that. I think that even back then, being a client for and then working with a high protein thing, they had a lot of people fall off the wagon.
For sure. Yeah.
Because they probably didn't have the same metabolic issues that the ones that were successful were people similar to me.
Yes.
And the ones that actually needed more carbs couldn't stand it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good point because not only do we have different BMRs,
yeah,
but we have different set points of macros that work better for us or not. And not even just based on what our training is or our lifestyle, just generally. Some people tend to operate a lot better on higher carbs. And so in the vegan world, those are the people we see in YouTube videos or on social media, like the high carb, fruitarian, whatever.
Right.
Of course, we're not seeing the people who did it for a week and said, screw this because it doesn't work. We're seeing the people for whom it does work. And they're a very small percentage of the population, right?
Yes.
But they're now a voice for this way of eating and they're seemingly thriving, but that wouldn't work for me. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
So I think you have a good point. There's differences not just in our metabolic rates, but also the breakdown of macros that is going to work best for each person. And this is why the whole fitness and nutrition exercise, and I'm talking about like lifetime, is an experiment. Even professional athletes are still tweaking things and trying new things and changing up small portions of their training and their nutrition and recovery protocols, etc. So I feel like we just keep getting closer and closer to what works well for us. There's never going to be one answer. And then things change, right? Menopause, training changes, lost a bunch of weight. You've had amazing success in that department. These things change our metabolic rates and our carb and other macro needs, right? So it's never going to be static, even for one person.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that weight loss was a bit of time ago.
Yes, fair. Fair point.
But that taught me commitment and discipline and long-term goal kind of stuff.
Hmm.
It's just finding the formula now. And it was a shock to me when I realized maybe I have been this way all the time,
Hmm.
and that it does and may take more in a different formula.
Totally. At different points in our lives, depending on what's going on.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, let's do a really quick, what do you call it? Like a lightning round?
Sure.
Okay, so you had some interesting points also around working out that may or may not relate to the nutrition discussion.
Yeah.
So one of them was like comment on or discuss doing your circuit routine between 2 and 5 times per week. So this is strength training that you're talking about, right?
Yeah. I have to say, just comment. I feel like I fell off my workout wagon after COVID and injuries and all that.
Hmm.
And it has felt truly, I'm telling you, truly amazing to do more resistance training. Even after the couple of weeks, I got my bands, but I'm also combining it with weights. And I returned to the yoga studio, which power yoga there is weight,
Oh yeah, for sure.
but I do get the difference.
Hmm.
And at my age, I get it. I find it regulates my appetite too.
Interesting.
I don't have issues. The only time I had issues with regulating eating was too high carbs because I couldn't feel
Mhm.
grounded. And
I'm never full. If I just eat carbs,
yeah,
I could eat 4,000 calories and I won't be full. I won't be satiated.
yeah. So the workout thing has been a game changer. And I'm still making sure I get all my workouts in.
I think that's great. I think like your point in the kind of like what do you want to talk about notes
Mhm.
was like comment on this routine as your main thing.
In the resistance band senior book of yours,
Hmm.
you had the circuit routine as my main thing. It was on page 148. And then I emailed it to you and Zoe, or,
Hmm.
trainerized it to you guys.
Hmm.
And Zoe gave it her blessing. Yeah, I've got all. And I like that. I feel complete after I,
I think it's good. This is a full body routine. I'm not looking at the exact one right now,
right.
either in the book or the one that you sent us. The point is that it trains all of your main muscle groups every time you work out. So we don't need to split it into like today is chest day and tomorrow is back day and now it's leg day.
Right.
Honestly, it's not super useful to train that way. So the full body thing, that's how I train. Even if I do 5
Oh,
lifting days
cool.
in a week, it's all full body, like 90% of the time. Sometimes I'll do upper body and lower body, but not very often.
So you're telling me I don't need to focus on like, oh, I can't work out today because it has to be a recovery day or an active recovery day.
No, actually, this is a good point because the longer we have strength trained, like the more strength training experience we have,
Yeah.
the less time it takes for our muscles to recover. So if you were a complete newbie, which you're not, but
Right.
if you were, it would take up to 2 days for your muscles to finish recovering after a workout. But pro athletes, their muscle recovery is like 10 hours or something, and then they can train again. So we're kind of in between those,
Yes,
obviously.
we are. Well, I'll tell you the
You know?
other incredibly positive thing is I'm a lot stronger than I thought I was.
Oh, that's cool.
I'm using the 40-pound, the black,
Amazing.
except
Mhm.
for my injured shoulders. So I'm feeling all bad, like I'm so. But question, I am remembering previous workouts that I did in the past, like before COVID, where I combined like a squat with a bicep curl.
Yeah.
It's like a compound movement.
Yeah.
And that's cool. I like that. So if I do that, here's my question to you. When I started, which is just recently, right? I would do bicep curls from standing. I do squats. Maybe I'd hold a 5-pound weight squatting or 10 or whatever. And 3 sets, and I still need to work towards that 8 or 7. I'm getting better at that. Like, okay, how much resistance should I use?
Mhm.
If I combine them and do a compound movement where I'm doing a bicep curl and a squat, do 3 sets of that count for 3 biceps and 3 squats? Because that cuts the workout time in half.
Yes. Okay, this is a great question. I find that those combo moves are best for conditioning days when you want to get your heart rate up
Okay.
and not focus on strength. Here's the thing. If you're really pushing yourself properly with a squat, you should be using 4 times as much weight at least as your bicep curls. So if you're doing a squat with a bicep curl, you're not using enough weight for your squat to challenge your legs.
Okay. Gall dang it.
I know. Here's an exception though. Kettlebells. Coach Zoe and I are both obsessed with kettlebells, but a lot of the movements that you can do with those, like swings and cleans, are just naturally combination moves, but they're different than what you can do with dumbbells. They're very kettlebell specific. Like you've got the weight resting on your forearm. There's a little more stability and balance involved. Definitely conditioning, like you're getting your heart rate up, but you're also working strength. So things like kettlebell complexes. Complexes are basically what you're talking about, like multiple moves
Yeah.
all combined.
Yeah.
But even then, I'm often doing 4 lunges on each leg with one specific kettlebell, right? And then 1 overhead press because it's too heavy to do more,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if it's appropriate for 4 lunges, it's appropriate for 1 overhead press.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
So sorry to burst the bubble there, but if you've already done your main strength training routine,
Yeah.
we often like to put a little finisher at the end. It's completely optional. It's like lower priority, but that's where you have like your lunge and your overhead press mixed, or, you know, you're on the ground doing a dead bug for abs and also a kettlebell floor press for chest and triceps, right? So that's definitely more conditioning, but it's not what I would call strength training.
Because you're not going to get to your 7 on your legs if you do that.
Exactly. 7, like as in
As
rate
in
of
1 to
perceived
10.
exertion. Yeah. 1 sitting on the couch, 10 holy shit, you want to be around 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Okay, so why don't we continue the convo in Trainerize?
Okay.
Was there anything last minute right now that you wanted comments on?
Just in your opinion, given my unique situation, when I say that I knew I was burning fat when I felt hungry, not uncomfortably hungry, like I don't have a eating disorder type, would you still endorse that or support that? That if I, Julia, know it's good to, pooping is good, all that stuff, it's good to have a few hours, then I should do that of finish eating, and then know that it's best for me to not eat before I go to bed. And if I do eat, to have like a piece of fruit or.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned near the beginning of our conversation, like the rules idea, like there's so many rules about,
There are.
Timing and whatever. We're more about what does your whole 24-hour period look like, and does it work specifically for you? So some people don't eat for 3 hours before they go to bed because their digestion just like keeps them awake if they eat too close to going to bed, or, it's like a physical discomfort thing.
Right.
They're not going to sleep properly. They feel too awake, whatever. For me, it's the opposite. If I don't eat right before I go to bed, I'm going to wake up at 4 a.m. ravenous.
You do have a rockin' metabolism.
It's ridiculous.
Karina. So just out of idle curiosity, because I don't think that's going to work for me.
No.
What do you eat before you go to bed?
Usually a protein shake.
And what's in your protein shake, by the way?
Literally just water and as little as I can handle because I don't want to pee a million times at night.
Exactly.
So little amount of water and just a scoop of protein powder. That's it.
So with a scoop of protein powder and a little amount of water on your scale of 1 to 10 of a hunger scale, when you go to bed, you've just had your little bit of protein shake-ish. What would you rate yourself? I'm just curious.
10 being super ravenous, 1 being full.
Okay. Or you could, I was thinking of the opposite, like
okay.
One being starving and 10 being stuffed.
Got it. Probably like 6.
And you had dinner a couple of hours before that where you ate a buttload of food.
I eat dinner pretty late and I go to bed pretty early. So I would eat dinner like 7:30 or 8 sometimes, and I go to bed at 10.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Mind you, I'm not really eating a lot after dinner. Like dinner is kind of it.
Right.
And then if I need, I feel like I have a protein shake as an option.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot happening between the dinner and the going to bed. But for some people, that's like 5 hours. right? Depending on when they go to bed and when they eat, whatever.
Exactly.
So that would be different. For me, I'd probably have to have something larger than a protein shake.
Yeah. Final question for today, although I could go on.
All good.
Do you also, you and Zoe, prescribe learning about each individual, how long to space food? I am not hypnotized by the whole intermittent fasting thing.
Yeah, me neither.
I'm accepting of the fact that I don't like to, I have a cup of coffee with soy milk in the morning and a little bit of something, maybe an apple, whatever, and then I eat when I'm ready to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Any tips you have on really regulating the space between food?
It's all trial and error, honestly. There's no one answer there. I know for myself that I operate better eating more often but smaller amounts.
Yeah.
I never really like that feeling, completely stuffed feeling. And I feel like I can't stuff a lot of food into my face all at once anyway. It's just not comfortable.
Right.
But I get hungry again. So I'm eating smaller meals, but like 5 or 6 of them. And they're spaced.
That makes sense.
Obviously differently than if I would eat 3, right?
What are your 3 favorite convenient proteins?
Well, the protein powder, of course. That's like the cop-out answer. Fava bean tofu right now is a huge favorite because 91% of its calories come from protein, which is higher than the vast majority of animal products.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. Where do you find that?
I just get it at my local grocery store, Save On Foods. It's in the tofu section.
That's amazing. I haven't seen it here, so I think I'm going to Google it and see what I can find.
Totally should. And the third one I would say right now is soy curls. Do you use those?
I love soy curls.
Right? It's like the more interesting version of TVP, which reminds me of being vegetarian in the 90s.
Yes. And I think I was hesitant to use them because it went against my coming full circle to the beginning of our conversation. Like, no,
it's quote processed.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. I just had a conversation about this. Why do we, and now I'm talking about we in general, not you and me specifically.
Right.
Why do we have this idea that soy curls are processed and should be avoided, but not rolled oats? They're made basically in the same way. They're one ingredient.
Yeah.
Literally one ingredient. They're heated, they're cooked, and then they're made into shapes.
Then they're squished.
Yeah, they're squished. Exactly. It's not that different. There's a little bit that happens in the soy curl making where they remove the fatty parts, like they remove the oil. So it's really high in protein, but it's basically a similar process. Why don't we consider them the same thing?
Henceforth, I'm going to do that.
Henceforth. Okay, good.
Seitan, same thing.
Yes.
Seitan's awesome.
Right?
It's just that I really feel like I programmed myself incorrectly. Like that the only Whole Foods plant-based thing, we have a tendency to lump like soy curls and seitan in with processed foods, which have their place too. Like tofurkey has its place.
Oh, for sure.
Gardein chicken and
Beyond Burgers, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then the only Whole Foods plant-based proteins are going to end up being edamame, tofu, tempeh, and a buttload of beans. And I like beans.
Yeah, but there's only so many of those you can eat reasonably within a day, right?
Right. So I feel, again, I'm giving myself permission to do what feels good in my body. And all of it is a fraction of processing compared to eating any freaking animal.
Oh, so well put.
A fraction.
So well put. We're eating the original source of energy that these animals are getting anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. So well said. Could not have said it better myself. Well, so great to speak with you, Julia. I'm glad we could connect.
Yeah, a pleasure. Really a pleasure, Karina.
Julia, thanks so much for booking in. Awesome to chat with you. Don't forget to access our show notes at nobullshitvegan.com/190, where you can sign up for my insider newsletter that gives you exclusive access to things like free strategy sessions, book giveaways, and tips for vegan world domination. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Thanks for listening to the No Bullshit Vegan podcast at nobullshitvegan.com.